The title is Violence Against Women in the Kenyan Political Arena. How did we get here? And go ahead and put it on presentation mode and start your lecture, Florence.
Thank you. My name is Florence Maina. I am an MTH student from St. Paul's University. I'm specializing in gender and theology. I am deeply honored today to be here. I would like us to, first of all, before I begin my presentation, that we observe a moment of silence in cognizance of the millions of women around the world, and men too, that are experiencing any kind of violence as we observe 16 days of activism. Thank you. Thank you all of you who are listening to me from Kenya and all over the world. I would like to take this moment to thank Dr. Mary Kehuha for bringing to my attention the opportunity to participate in this series of presentations. I would also like to thank one of my mentors, Dr. John Michael Kiboi from St. Paul's University, for his lessons on the confluence of philosophy and theology. I would also like to appreciate and then Professor Esther Mombo for mentoring me on gender issues and African theologies for the liberation of women. And finally, I would like to thank Oxford Center for Mission Studies for accepting my proposal to this presentation. As I introduce, violence against women is something that has been happening all over the world. And in Kenya, violence against women in the political arena is a persistent and distressing issue. It is reflective of bold gender inequalities deeply ingrained in the societal norms. Women participating in politics face various forms of violence, including physical harm, verbal abuse, and online harassment, with the intention of silencing their voices and maintaining male dominance in politics. This is rooted in traditional gender roles and exacerbated by institutional barriers. The problem underscores the need for legal reforms, awareness campaigns, and inclusive policies to create an environment where women feel safe and empowered to engage in politics. Addressing this issue is not only about ensuring individual safety, but is also crucial for fostering a more inclusive, equitable, and representative democracy in Kenya, unleashing the full potential of its diverse population and strengthening democratic foundations. There have been several instances of violence towards women. In 2013, a violent drama unfolded at City Hall after the then governor of Nairobi, Dr. Evans Kidero, allegedly slapped the Nairobi women's representative, Rachel Shebesh, during a heated verbal exchange outside his office. Shebesh had confronted Dr. Kidero over a then ongoing county employees strike, which had paralyzed operations over the unpaid salaries. Shebesh is said to have addressed the protesting workers outside the governor's office at City Hall in her capacity as the woman representative before proceeding to the governor's chamber to seek audience with him. From the media report, it is said that witnesses told the Standard Media Group that there was a heated exchange between the governor and the woman rep, though it was not clear what she uttered that could have infuriated Kidero. It is also interesting to note that minutes later, Kidero addressed the press where he claimed that he could not remember slapping anybody. These experiences of intimidation and harassment against women are a commonplace for women political aspirants, where patriarchal attitudes sometimes physically manifest, and where women bodies become battlegrounds for resistance to change. On the same, in an article published on 24th of August 2017 in Kenya, Kenya.co.ke by Michael Musyoka, the late Bomet governor, Joyce Laboso, revealed how her political rivals used animal blood to deter her campaigns. Laboso, who was vying for against Isaac Ruto, narrated an unfortunate ordeal to the famous television program, JK Live. Laboso claimed that her rivals planned to use dramatic stunts to show how her menstruation period would interfere with her ability to serve people of Bomet. She narrated the sinister plans to Jeff Koinange, the host of the show, by stating, I was going for a church function in Tepalungu, and the plan was to get some women and some blood from Abita. The women were supposed to pretend to welcome me, then splash the blood on me. This, she explained, was to cause her embarrassment, which intended to show that a woman cannot lead the county because of her female anatomy, and therefore would use natural biological process experienced by women during their menstruation. Laboso added that those who opposed her election would go to the extent of asking the intended voters, what if I got my periods during a conference? Just recently, in 2023, in an article published in February by the BBC News Nairobi, Gloria Orwaba, a Kenyan senator, was asked to leave parliament because of an apparent blood stain on her trousers. She told the BBC that she was proud to stand up against period shaming. According to this article, it is noted that even some female senators also criticized her, saying that she was being disrespectful. This can be explained as an internalized socialization of menstruation shame, even by other women. Gloria, in response, said she understood the discrimination faced by women and girls in Kenya when they are on their periods. This violence did not spare her despite of her status as a senator. So on this slide is I would have wanted to show the representation, but it's not possible for me to do that right now. But it is just showing that there's a significant amount of increased numbers of representation. Where since independence, we started by having only 2 women after the colonial government, and the statistics show that the numbers have been increasing. But despite this milestone, the 2-third gender role that was proposed in Parliament in 2010 is yet to be implemented, and violence is still a disturbing reality. So one of the things that has been noted as a cause for that is a thing that we normally call the unholy trinity. This is what we call the intersection of religion, which is mostly Christianity in Africa, and culture and politics. And it is, sometimes I use this tool to demonstrate how the 3 sit on each, create a seat that is grounded with each as a leg to support the other. So there has been an interesting statement among African women scholars and feminists who claim that the problem of women dehumanization is the unholy trinity. This is the intersection of culture, politics, and religion. And so how Christianity was inherited in Africa, it was brought by mostly by the British missionaries, they brought Christianity with a lot of adulation from the beliefs of the church fathers. And so what Kenya inherited is prescribed the subordination of women as a natural and God-given situation. The notions of subordination of women by missionaries viewed women as evil and inferior to men. These ideologies created a picture of an ideal womanhood who was to have a particular moral and spiritual qualities. But apart from that, then the question I'm asking at the title is how did we get there? So in Africa and in Kenya, we inherited a Christianity that had Greek adulations in it. So the Greek system, as we know it, is a system of thought that emerged from ancient Greek and was developed by thinkers such as Plato, Delos, Stoics, and Aristotle. But among these philosophers, the most influential in terms of the theology that we have is Plato and Aristotle. Plato and Aristotle shaped some of the perspectives that we have today and their beliefs on what it meant to be female and male. So one of the most influential person who came out clean as a person who thought that women were really had a subordinate place was Aristotle, who argued that women were unable to exercise the virtues required for political leadership. He claimed that their involvement in public affairs would disrupt the natural order of society. Furthermore, Aristotle associated women with weakness and passivity, contrasting them with men, whom he regarded as strong and active. He viewed women primarily as objects of desire for men, emphasizing their role in procreation and preservation of the family unit. So what Aristotle had a dualistic perspective of life. We know the analogy of the cave, where he believed that the world was, there was the world of form and the world of physical matter, and that of forms. There have been arguments that Plato believed that the spirit was masculine, which was the world of form, and the physical was feminine, and therefore inferior. Aristotle, on the other hand, viewed women primarily for the purpose of creation and the maintenance of family units. Some of the utterances that were made by Plato, or some of the things that are found in his writing, is a statement like the male is by nature superior and the female is inferior, and the one rules and the other is ruled. And the other one is that the female is, as it were, a mutilated male. So one of my questions is what we would think about Aristotle's thoughts. Maybe we could have like a 2 minute or a minute and maybe have views, share views on what we would think about Aristotle's thoughts about women from the audience. Is anyone hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Yes, so I'm asking for responses on our thoughts on what Plato thought about women. Aristotle thought about women. My thoughts are that the thought that women, for example, female is a mutilated male is, I think it is a misplaced way of looking at the female gender. I don't know what your thoughts would be for that.
I think we would all agree with you. What I find quite interesting is I have not really made the connection between the supposed inferiority of women and the Greek philosophers. It's just a connection I've not made, although those philosophers have certainly been very influential in in the history of Western civilization. So that's new.
All right. So yeah, the reason why I'm asking why is because I tended to trace back to where we are and show the interconnectedness to where it got. So after Aristotle, one of the people who came after Aristotle was Plotinus, who was a very influential Neoplatonic philosopher. He linked philosophy and theology. This is the confluence of philosophy and theology. So he's credited as facilitating the natural bridge between Platonic philosophies and the mystics of God as they appeared in diverse religions. And then after Plotinus was Philo of Alexandria, who was Hellenistic Jewish leader. He's the one who is identified as having theologized what Plotinus was making an argument about, using the Jewish tradition. He connected the philosophy with the Jewish tradition, which also was inherited by the Christian. And one of the things that he held was that in the concept of women, he seemed to have been influenced by Aristotle's worldview by adopting a situation of sexual polarity where women were seen as inferior and men were seen as superior. So this is what Philos stated. He said that in the soul of a progressive man, there are thoughts that are masculine and some of offsprings are feminine. The masculine thoughts, he continued to argue, are those which are emulous of wisdom and of all virtue in general, and of that which is good and alone is good. But the feminine kind, having the position of daughters, are under service to the bodily needs and are under the dominion of the passions. So having been a very influential person in terms of bridging philosophy or the confluence between philosophy and theology, he is alleged to have influenced the views of the church fathers, one of them being St. Augustine of Hippo. St. Augustine he subordinated women to man using his exegesis of Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, 7 and 10. And also Augustine, this is the argument about the image of God. So for Augustine, the image refers to authority other than essence. So his argument was that woman was given to man and woman was of small intelligence. And although he viewed women having a spiritual image, he still held that women cannot represent God exclusively without their husband, to whom a woman is given a husband. That has been explained by one of the African women theologians doing theology from a post-colonial perspective, Lydia Mwaneki, in her book, The Image of God in Women. The other person was Tertullian of Carthage. Tertullian was from North Africa. He viewed women as bearing the original sin, and therefore all women carried this curse with them. He argued, one of the statements he made was that women is a temple built on a sewer, the gateway to the devil. He states that women, he also states, women, you are the devil's doorway. You led astray one whom the devil would not dare attack directly. It was your fault that the Son of God had to die. You should always go in mourning and rags. You are the unsealer of the forbidden tree. So what we find as theology as it was brought by missionaries in Africa is that it had all that baggage. And so when it was brought, it with all the laws that were associated with colonization, that is what was inherited. So if Lydia Moneki is one of the people who have done an interrogation, and her argument is that the image of God is what has been marred in women and has created a misconception of whether women truly bear the image of God. Or this also created an ideal womanhood because of the original sin that was associated with the fall of humanity, and all trickling back to, all tracing back to Eve. So theology did not come to Africa in a vacuum. It came in a cultural matrix. So this theology, as we know it, it came into a place where there were also existing patriarchal structures. So according to Githuku 2016, even after more than 50 years today since Kenya got independence, most of women have not realized their full potential. Githuku attributes this oppressive traditional beliefs. The influence of cultural practices that subordinate women are still so alive today and are still influencing the perceptions with which women leadership is viewed. These perceptions can be found in some of the African sayings. For example, there's the Kikuyu saying which says, "Muisi na mudu muka atigaga keha akwa," from the Kikuyu community, translated as "he who robs in the company of a woman or with a woman will live in fear until she's dead, because a woman is perceived as one who cannot keep a secret." So such attitudes, when they interact with the kind of theology that we have reflected upon above, create a situation where women leadership is sometimes automatically disqualified. And also, when we look at politics, we realize that some of the things that we are not able to look at the demographics of Kenyan politics and divorce them from the patriarchal nature of the Kenyan society, influenced by religion and also by culture. So basically there's nothing in the law, in the Kenyan law, that suggests that women cannot seek political participation. But some of the political issues which are rooted in containing women from accessing political participation is like lack of economic empowerment, where most women in Kenya still are economically disempowered. Most of them lack income generating avenues, and some of those income generating avenues are male dominated, such as land ownership for communities that depend on agriculture, or owning of cattle among pastoralists sometimes is just left to the men. So this phenomenon is traditionally rooted with other underlying factors such as polygamy, inheritance, property ownership, education opportunities, inequality in empowerment sectors, domestic and gender-based violence, female genital mutilation, early marriages, and the list goes on and on. So up to that point is showing the intersection, or what I refer to as the unholy trinity. So the question for me has always been, how do we dismantle the unholy trinity? My argument is that because religion and culture and politics are the three arms that intersect together to create the unholy trinity, it is just looking at them and looking for a way to respond to each. So like for religion, it's to offer an African philosophical, theological response on the image of God in women. And for culture, it is to do a cultural hermeneutics. For politics, it is to implement the law to end the impunity on violence. So one of the things that is clear is that Greek philosophy or religion, Christianity as we know it in Africa, has baggage from Greek philosophy. But we have some of the elements in Africa that are philosophical that could bring a counter narrative to an argument that women are inferior. So Ubuntu philosophy is one of those that can act as a theological response to the dualism, the subordination of women that we see. So one of the biggest observation in this lecture concerning what in religion informs dehumanization of women is the dehumanized image of God in women that can be traced back to the formation of the Christian religion. So a philosophical solution rooted in African philosophy that would undo this view is an ideal approach. The Ubuntu philosophy, I am because you are, and because you are, therefore I am, deeply rooted in the African thought, offers a compelling theological response to this issue of violence against women in the Kenyan political arena. This philosophy is grounded in the principle of recognizing the divine image in every individual. Ubuntu aligns with theological beliefs that emphasize the inherent worth and equality of women by interrogating Ubuntu into theological framework, integrating Ubuntu into theological framework. This approach would inspire a collective responsibility for social transformation, challenging harmful cultural norms that foster a sense of shared humanity that actively condemns gender-based violence. The practical application of Ubuntu is shaping policies and practices within the political landscape, which underscores the need for legislative reforms and institutional changes that prioritize the safety, empowerment, and equal participation of women. Furthermore, fostering interfaith dialogues on Ubuntu encourages collaboration among religious leaders to promote initiatives that counter violence against women, contributing to a more just and inclusive political environment reflective of Ubuntu values. The other thing is, other than Ubuntu, then we could do cultural hermeneutics, because when religion intersects with the culture, then it empowers, they empower, or they form an intersection that creates the oppression. One of the people who have responded to the culture is Musimbi Kanyoro, who is also a member of the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologian. She proposes a framework which she titles Cultural Hermeneutics. This framework offers a transformative approach to addressing violence against women in the Kenyan political arena by applying dynamic interpretation of cultural values. This framework facilitates a nuanced reconsideration of traditional norms that perpetuate gender-based violence. Also, it also has an element of community dialogue, which are guided by cultural sensitivity, which becomes crucial in challenging integrated beliefs and fostering an open discourse that respects both local tradition and contemporary notions of gender equality. Kanyoro's approach empowers women within their cultural context by identifying and promoting positive cultural elements that support gender equality, ensuring that strategies for empowerment resonate with and are sustainable with local communities. Moreover, by incorporating cultural insights into policy reforms and educational campaigns, this approach seeks to craft solutions that are not perceived as external imposition, but as a culturally informed initiative, fostering a deeper understanding of women's role in society and politics. The other thing about cultural hermeneutics is to critique some of the declarations that have been made using a cultural lens. Like, for example, the one that we just looked at here by the Kikuyu community, this one that says that he who robs with a woman will live in fear until the woman is dead. So it is to interrogate what this means and what role it plays in the subordination of women. So the other part of the unholy trinity that we would want to look at or respond to is politics. So in effectively addressing and ending impunity for violence against women in the Kenyan political arena, this necessitates a multi-phased strategy. First and foremost, we need a comprehensive legal reforms, which must be enacted to exemplify, criminalize all forms of violence, coupled with gender-sensitive definition, stringencies and penalties, and procedural mechanisms. Law enforcement agents should undergo specialized training, fostering cultural competence and gender sensitivity. This, for example, include the police, because they're the ones who would be mandated to respond to such kind of violence. There's also need to create a public awareness by campaigns, which must be launched to inform citizens about the laws and challenging societal attitude. We should also establish victim support services, then protect whistleblowers, and collaboration with civil society organization. This can also create or boost an intersectional support system where everyone is able to network with the other in case there is need for that. So furthermore, international cooperation should be leveraged for technical assistance and sharing best practices. There should also be rigorous data collection and research efforts. These are essential to inform policy designs and evaluate the effectiveness of implemented measures. So by combining legal, social, and international strategies, Kenya can create a comprehensive framework that actively combat impunity and foster a safer and more inclusive political environment. Yes, so up to that point, unless there is a question, I am willing to answer. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if you would like to ask a question, please go to the bottom of the screen and you will see a button that says responses. If you click on that, or reactions, you click on that, and then there's a raise hand. And if you raise your hand, then I can be able to see that to get your comment on that. So is there anyone here who would like to raise a question or comment?
Okay, I'll start. Thank you for the presentation, first of all, and as my colleague John has says that we perhaps many of us, and including me, we have never really traced back patriarchy and also the violence against women and to the Greek philosophy. So that was quite insightful, I would say. But the comments or the question that I would like you to respond to or perhaps elaborate a little bit more is when you said that the missionaries who have already got a baggage which trace back to the Greek philosophy comes to Africa, but into an existing patriarchal society or culture. So if you could elaborate a little bit more where what comes in, what the missionaries bring in, engage with the patriarchal structure or culture in African society, especially in Kenya. How do they work together in subjugating women to such image, I would say? Elaborate a bit more.
Yeah, so what we have as missionary theology is what I have just highlighted, how it came, and some of the texts that are in the Bible, sometimes like the letters of Paul, where women are silenced, and sometimes the interpretation of the image of God, sometimes the interpretation of the story of Genesis. So there are theologies that have been created around some of those texts that put the like the Genesis story puts the woman as the original sinner. So this then is empowered by some of the texts of Paul, where women are told, to, like in Corinth, to be silenced in church. And some of the texts, like the woman is, the man is the head and the woman is the neck. So such theologies is what missionaries came with. And then when when because they did not operate in a vacuum, there were some other patriarchal attitudes that existed within the African cultures. So some of those, because Africa is not a homogeneous, does not have a homogeneous culture, it is very diverse. So these cultures, the patriarchal attitudes manifest differently in different communities. For example, Kenya has more than 42 tribes with different cultural, diversities. So it is very contextual on how that verse intersects with a particular attitude in a certain tribe, and then how that then forms such an intersection. So when I used the Kikuyu example, this is just one of the many. So when Musimbi Kanyoro talks about cultural hermeneutics, what she's saying is that in every culture, some of the declarations that are made through cultural lens need to be interpreted so that the effect they have when they intersect with some of the theologies that have been that are Christian, then how they manifest to inform the society.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Damon, please go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you for presenting your lecture to us. It helped us to understand more about the influence of the philosophers upon this kind of thinking. Now, I was working with a student who graduated very well about church conflicts, and we recognize that when theology and cultures are fused together and form the bedrock for church conflict, is very, very hard to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
If the two things come together to reinforce something, that thing is almost like solid. So then you add a third thing called politics to create this unholy trinity. That makes it even harder to change. Because theology and culture already, when they fuse together, it's very hard to change. When you have politics, it's even more difficult to change. Now, can you enlighten us a little bit more how politics fuse with culture and theology and make these things even harder to change?
Well, thank you so much. I am thinking in the Kenyan context, and what we see as politics cannot, in an African setting, be separated from religion and culture, because what basically informs the kind of policies and political attitudes that are there in Kenya and in Africa is sometimes mostly the religion, and these religions are sometimes, other than Christianity and other missionary religions, there's also the African traditional religions that are still very much alive. So the politics is just a term to, like, say the things that are done when people are vying for seats or when people are trying to make policies. But the declarations sometimes that are made by political leaders are very much deep-rooted in the religions and in the cultural declarations. So they are informed. This religion and culture informs the politics that is practiced. Okay. So when that then happens, it forms a very integrated, concept that is hard to put apart together because it operates together. Yeah.
I understand. So it's really an outworking of theology and culture expressed in the political arena.
Yes.
And that also makes it very, very, very hard to change. We are talking about turning a Titanic around 180 degrees, and it's going to be a huge job.
Thank you. Florence, would it be possible to stop sharing so that we can see? Yes, then we feel like we're in a room together. Yeah, John.
Thank you very much, Florence. It's quite depressing, really. I don't mean your presentation. Your presentation was very clear. It's obvious that a lot of political energy, a lot of cultural energy, and even within the church, a lot of theological energy has been used over the centuries to oppress women, or at least to keep them in an inferior position.
Yeah.
Same thing. Why do you think that men fear women so much?
It is also something that I really struggle with. Sometimes I was joking with a friend of mine and telling her, I think a woman is just this mysterious, very powerful creature that the male does not know what to do with. But I would not be able to answer that as a woman. I would not be able to know why it is that a man would see me as a threat. Well, in women, what women do is nurture life and be custodians of the things that have been created by God. So it is also something that I struggle with a lot. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Sarah. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Francis, for your presentation. Bringing the Plato and the Greek philosopher in it, yes, that was also a surprising factor for me in that sense. However, when you move to your second stage of your presentation, try to rebaptize the unholy Trinity to Holy Trinity. I felt it is makes much more sense and much more hopeful in that sense rather than the blink things. And I really like to see more of that in the sense of how to turn that element, because you have a very good starting point in relation to looking into how to make unholy Trinity into Holy Trinity. I would call it, rather than this dismantling. It is just, I felt you have a very good points to make, starting from within your own cultural and religious understanding. And I would like you to develop that further rather than sticking to the Greek philosophers and all these things. And then another thing, I think one of the things, I don't know why, despite having lots of denominations with our Christianity, we still look into the theology of our faith, very homogeneous view of things. And how can we also dismantle that kind of understanding of homogeneity of our theological perspectives in that? Also, if that would be very interesting to bring. I think you are really doing a very great job in that sense.
Thank you.
Okay, so while others are still reflecting on your presentation, I would just like to ask you a personal question. You are a paralegal with experience on human rights and gender equality issues in Kenya, and now you are getting into theology. So from your experience of work and also your interest and passion about human rights and gender equality, do you see where any areas, concrete areas where the church or theologians or theological institution can work together with secular forces in order to fight against or combat this violence against women?
Thank you. One of the things that we have been recently engaged in is faith and feminism, in a way that they do initially the feminism or advancement of feminist principles were seen as operating in the terms of the secular activism. But then realization that of the agency of faith or religion in our context brings to cognizance the people who are working towards liberating the situation, the agency of faith. So what the church is doing is looking for women women and men, or the church institutions that are willing to engage with with the movements that are not operating within the church space to form a, to recognize the agency of the church and to form a mutual grounding in terms of gaining from one another. So in realizing that it is not possible for feminism to be done alone in a situation where religion is one of the biggest policy makers. So there's that is happening a lot today. Then there is also in theological training, there's a lot of writing that is being done by like African women theologians that is encouraging women, even those who are not within the church space, to respond to issues, because it is by creating a space where even those that are not within the church space recognize how much religion has been used to oppress women and how much religion can also be a tool of liberating women in these spaces. So there's a lot of faith and the secular movements working together today.
Thank you. David Singh.
Yes, thank you very much. I do agree with Sarah's point about the philosophical background, although I understand the reason why you felt that was needed. But I'm looking at the data we have on women participating in politics in different parts of the world. And according to one data that I've come across, nearly 25% of parliamentarians worldwide are women, and I can see a microcosm of that. In fact, in a country like India, where the country is being ruled by a patriarchal party called the BJP, even in this party, we have a large number of women participating in the political process. And they have also been included in the cabinet, which is really surprising. A good number of the BJP's spokespersons are powerful, outspoken women who are seen everywhere on the news, and they also sit in all kinds of powerful committees. So that leads me to the question of what really does violence against women in politics mean? Is it violence against them because they are women? Or is it violence against them, all forms of violence? I understand. Is it violence against them because they are competitors, or they are seen as challengers? So I know of so many men in politics, especially in my context, where men have exactly the same kind of experiences that women are going through. And their experiences of being marginalized, of being suppressed or oppressed, is no different from the experience of women. So I'm just trying to wrap my brain around the problem. What really is the problem? What does violence against women in politics really mean? So this is not to deny that women don't suffer, that there is no systemic operation against them, and I can see that all around the world. But as far as politics is concerned, once they are in power, a good number of them, what does violence really mean when they are sharing power with men?
I think from a Kenyan context, even when women are in positions of power, we have not reached to a point where we can say that they're sharing power with men. Our constitution has advanced to a place where women, there are provisions in our constitutions and in our laws that women should participate. So as I said, there's nothing in the law that stops women from participating. But the kind of violence that is subjected to women when they are competing in these spaces is what we are talking about, because it is verbal, it is physical, it is sexual assault, it is any kind of shaming that would, and using the culture and some of the religious texts to bring down women and to discourage them from participating. So it comes with internalized perspectives that it is true, it is justified, because, like, for example, the biblical headship, that the man is the head, you know, and in a culture, in a context where religion, like most 80% of the population is Christian, then it is a narrative that becomes very popular. And also the cultures within which then this narrative is operating. There are some aspects within the cultures that marginalize the women, that they have declarations that are to put a man ahead of the woman. So even when a woman is violated physically, verbally, or in whatever sense, it is something that is let to pass because it is normal. If there's a Kikuyu saying that says this, and then a politician declares it in public, it is not, it is, the statement itself is violent, and it propagates for violence, but then it is let to pass because it is cultural language. And so those justify, even when then violence is perpetrated on women, it is not seen as really as with the seriousness it should be, because those women who dare to get into those spaces are seen as deviant. So there's a lot of all those elements. Yeah, so when I'm talking about violence in politics, is when women are trying to vie for political seats or for leadership positions, and the kind of violence that they meet as they try to do that.
And then Sarah.
So I have a question, Florence. Thank you so much for giving us lots of food for thought. One of the things that struck me was when you were talking about Ubuntu philosophy, that there's a traditional African way of approaching life. I wonder whether or not there is any gender dimension to that perspective.
What we have as Ubuntu philosophy what qualifies a human being to be human in Africa has nothing to do with gender. Actually, even in most African communities, traditional, God has no gender. So what it means to be a human being is to be within a community where gender is not a thing to consider. So the statement "I am because you are" is not gendered. It is just affirming the humanity of the other, and the humanity of the other is seen as with the affinity, is an affinity of a connected humanity with the divine. So it has no gender, but I think now those are some of the things within the African concepts that have not been magnified a lot, and that is what I am proposing. There are so many others, like depending on even on the context, because Africa is big. So if you go to a place like Tanzania, you will find Ujamaa, which is a community idea of people coming together. So there are so many of them depending on where you are addressing the issue. So, but Ubuntu cuts across largely in most African countries, and it is a popular and a common thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mary Kehuhal.
Okay, it's Mary. Mary. Yes. Please unmute, Mary. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Florence, for the presentation. My question is, you present to us the unholy trinity of religion, culture, and politics. My question is, do you see in all those elements, do you see any windows of opportunity? For example, you mentioned religion. Are there any windows of opportunity within that sphere, cultural windows of opportunity that could be leveraged to make a movement from the unholy Trinity to the Holy Trinity, leveraging the windows of opportunity? Because even when there is such demeaning proverbs within culture, we also find those that affirms women. Yeah, do you see it that way, or what would you say?
My take is that there are a lot of opportunity, many opportunities. One of the things that religion can do is rethink how we do our hermeneutics of the religious texts. And, there are so many tools that we are using to interrogate how the Bible is interpreted. We have post-colonial tools, we have feminist hermeneutics, we have cultural hermeneutics by by Musimbi Kanyoro, and all those things are tools that can be used to question. Like, for example, when we talk about biblical headship, it is to question what that means for the African society today. Using the tools that we have to interpret those texts. When we talk about like cultural hermeneutics, yes, it is true that in our cultures, we have very many very positive aspects, and Ubuntu is one of them. But within the small fragmentations of communities, then there are others that can be magnified to amplify the humanity of women, and they are there, they do exist. Yeah, so there are so many opportunities. We just need to keep exploring which one works in what context and how that would respond to the situations. Yeah, thank you.
Sarah? Yeah, I have two common questions of these things. One of them, again, when Anne asked you a question, and then also related to your presentation, the concept of community and collective rather than gender or individualism. And do you think this concept can be a good starting point to handle this issue in relation to the gender gap between men and women, especially if you bring it to discussion that Christianity brought individualism in form of man and a woman, a gender gap, and then also hierarchy of the gender things. And do you think this question, the issue of the concept of collectivism and community can be a way to respond to that? That is one thing. The second thing is, again, back to David's question. Actually, it was very interesting observation. We need to take it into consideration. The world of politics is violence. Doesn't matter against men or against women. It is sadly ruthless environment for both gender. Do you think, can women learn how to handle that kind of violence in the sense of flipping them, using them in a more positive way to correct society? Do you know what I'm just trying to say? Instead of singing the victimized song all the time, can we flip to use it? Because we know that the world of politics is so dirty, so ruthless. How can we think there is a way to stop singing victimization song, but even bringing new changes into this world? And if so, how? Then again, from the culture and religion, how can collectivism understanding and community understanding can also help to bridge the gap in the gender issue? That's my two questions.
Concerning community and how community can counter individualism and the hierarchies of gender, it is one of the things that I've noted is that even in African communities, as much as we have elements, we have universal beliefs in affirming the humanities of the other human being. There are some patriarchal attitudes within the cultures. And so it is not just Christianity, it is also in some of the cultural ideas and attitudes. So how that is to be countered is by magnifying that which is within the culture that serves both men and women. And so for me, the proposal was something like Ubuntu, because it cuts across. It cuts across because it is the affirmation of the divinity, recognizing the divine image in every individual. That is the essence of Ubuntu, every individual. So that when such philosophies are magnified, then they are able to counter what Christianity sometimes present in terms of gender disparities, and what sometimes culture argues about gender disparities, the different cultures. And concerning whether we are able to move beyond being victims to turn around the narrative, I think there's a lot of progress that has been made by women in Africa that is identifiable. There are so many women that have been able to be very bold and question, and even men to question some of the things that manifest in public. So there's a lot of hope. It's only that, as one of the participants said, it is an elephant. It's something that we cut into small pieces gradually. So we have hope and we are hopeful. I look at the work of African women theologians, which has been publishing a lot of responses into what culture and religion portrays to women or to the society, and how those things shape the society. So there's a lot of hope. And then there's the new, like the intergenerational group of young women that are looking at faith and some of the feminist principles and trying to incorporate them. So it is very hopeful. And yeah, so it is not always a narrative of women being victim. It is a narrative of pointing at what we have, what has informed our past, and trying to aspire for a future. But then we have to tell the wrongs so that we are able to do the rights.
Can I just follow up with your first things? Again, listening to the language you are using, this, and not only you, most of us, we are using. Again, we are using very much the language of individualism. That is why, for example, even which again influenced by perhaps the Western scholarship in that sense. For example, when within the understanding of community, we normally come to our mind individuals, community built of individuals. But what I meant is understanding of collectivism. For example, let's say you say the image is in every individual. Why can't we say the image is collective? In fact, the image is collective, it's not individual.
All right.
Do you know what I mean? How can we give the language in that sense? Because the image is collective. There is one image in all of us as a collective, rather than in all of us as an individual. It could be both, but how can we? So far, it's been the stress being in every individual, much less in collective. Can we flip that, especially within what we have in our cultures, especially in Asian, in Africa? It's the collective understanding, as you says, you are, therefore I am. Yes, that's what I meant in relation to using the language of that.
All right. Yes, it is an eye-opener in a proposal. I think one of the persons that I've studied who attempted to use a collective understanding of the image of God is Jürgen Moltmann, who, although argues from a Western aspect, does not see the Trinity. Jürgen Moltmann sees the Trinity as a community, not as the three persons as we normally struggle with the Trinity. So that aspect, from that aspect, then he creates what he calls a socio-Trinitarian understanding of God. And he proposes that then, if that was to be understood, then it would we would also be able to see humanity and the rest of creation as within the collective and image of God. So yeah, it is. I understand what you're saying, and I really do appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Mary, thank you very much. Now I would like to invite all our other sisters who have joined us all the way from Kenya to support and be in solidarity with Florence to not only ask questions, but also bring in your own inputs and comments, adding to the lecture, if there are any.
I've got a question.
Wanjiku,
Go ahead,
yeah. Unmute Wanjiku and
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sister Florence, for the lecture and the presentation. It was very informative. And the tie-in, especially looking at just the bedrock of the current patriarchal systems that we have in our country. Specifically, you pointed out to the political system and the way it treats the women. To just be able to trace it back from the philosophers to the church fathers, and now to see what is happening today was very interesting. Maybe I would ask if you have any personal experience, especially maybe in the political space or in any way that you have participated in the political space, maybe in your local area, in your county, and how you have experienced this, what you presented to us.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, how have you been able to maybe navigate it? And even if it's not your own personal experience, even if it's a personal experience of somebody else, the navigation part of the violence to women, especially in the political space. But once again, thank you so much for your presentation, Florence.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have not attempted vying for a political seat yet, but I have been, I am aware of women who have tried to vie for seats. Other than that, there are some of the public figures that we can identify with that we can, sometimes we for those of us who are bold enough to point at it and see it and talk about it, we are able to name the intersections when we see them on the media. I normally use the example of someone like Wangari Maathai, the late Wangari Maathai was one of the advocates for the environment in this country. Yet, if you look at her story and how she rose from being a normal village girl to winning the Nobel laureate for her work in ecofeminism, and to once having been a parliamentarian, and some of the things that were used against her as she tried to vie for the political seat had nothing to do with how competent she was in terms of leadership. We can, for every person who knows the legacy of Wangari Maathai, we know that she was not, she was adorned with leadership skills. She was able to sensitize the globe on the issues of environmental issues. But one of the things that was used constantly against her was her marital status, which was based on her divorce. And, apart from, other than looking at what she was bringing, the story of her marital status kept and resurfacing over and over in the political arena, to the point that Wangari Maathai once made a public declaration herself and said, I do not have a man to hang a coat in my room, which was for her to own her marital status so that it may stop being used as one of the things that would have stopped her from, whatever it is that she was doing. But then that in itself tells us that sometimes if she was, her book, The Unbowed, and I've seen a chat for someone who has put it in the chat, is that she did not bow to what was being told of her, especially from the cultural aspect, because her marital status could have been interpreted as informed by either the culture or maybe sometimes the religion, but then it was intersecting to stop her from vying for political seat. And so her ability to unbow, and and there are so many things that she had to stomach and be able to very resiliently work around and be able to get to where she was. So she's a perfect image of what violence towards women would look like, and the intersections of the three, and how they would curtail an African woman. So yeah, it is something like that. And I think because she's a public figure, her story is known. But I think there are so many other narratives in the public domain that can tell. If you look at Wanjiru, Bishop Margaret Wanjiru, and when she was divorcing Kamango, and how her divorce was used against her, and being a religious person, and also vying for a seat. And other than what she was able to give to the society, there was always a trivializing of her abilities to her marital status, which now is always informed by the culture and the religion. And so it forms the political arena. So yeah, those are the examples that I can give for now.
Yes, thank you. And NN, I only have NN in my screen. So if you would ask your question or make your comments, and please tell us your name. NN. So I only have NN. Yes, I don't have.
Unmute.
It's unmute now.
Can't hear her.
Ah,
She's talking and not just.
yes.
You're muted, NN.
Can you adjust your microphone or speaker? We cannot hear you, sorry. You have unmuted you have muted yourself now. Yes.
Yeah, I think there's something wrong.
I think there's something wrong with the microphone. So perhaps if you would just type your comments or questions. And in the meantime, Tom, you had a question.
Well, just a kind of, we've had this great group of people who've joined over the last few weeks, and it's been very good. Are you meeting to organize? I mean, one thing about politics is it's an organization game, not an individual game. And those who are well organized to bring concerns to the fore will have effect both in the church and in the state political apparatus. So it's just curious, what are you doing to organize and to bring crucial issues to the fore in terms of the inclusion of women within political and church power?
Thank you. One of the things that most of the organizations that are working towards feminist issues in Kenya is to sensitize the society on the need for the implementation of the third gender role. So activists within religious and outside religious spaces are that gender role came with was a provision that should have been implemented by now, but it was a proposal in the new constitution that was inaugurated in 2010. One of what it has is that representation should have at least a third of the gender of the minority gender. So, and up to from 2010 up to this date, it has been years, and yet it has not been implemented. So one of the things that is being pushed by activists is to make sure that this is implemented, so that when elections are being held, even political parties consider, you know, the representation of women, even as they front their candidates into participation for or vying for seats. And the other thing is, as I said, one of the things that has made a lot of progress in Kenya is the ordination of women in most of the like mainline churches that had originally been named as missionary churches. Most of them did not ordain women. And by missionary churches, I'm talking about like the Methodist, the Anglican, the Presbyterian church, you know, the churches that really were brought by missionaries. So there's a lot of ordination of female clergy in Kenya. And we are celebrating that. So it is having women representation in every spheres of life. And also a lot of effort has been made to make sure that women are involved in or are getting opportunities to study in theological education, so that from a theological perspective, they're able to address some of the theologies that are taught outside, you know, even when they are theologically trained, but at a late position, then they are able to challenge some of the attitudes and theologies out there. So those are some of the things that have are happening. Thank you.
Yes. So I think with that we can end our session today, but there's a message from NN. I still don't have her name, but anyway, I'll read it out. Sorry about my mic. I was going to affirm what Florence said about Mathai. She was entrenched in lifting up positive Kikuyu cultural resources, especially community ethos in her practical solutions. Oh yes, Nyambura.
Nyambura.
That's a name that's a very familiar name that I know, Nyambura. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, so thank you very much. Today we are ending the series that we had on African women in church and society, challenges and contributions. And thank you very much to not just Florence, but others like Mary, and where is Wanjiku gone? Okay, Wanjiku and the others who have contributed to this series. Thank you very much. And we wish you blessings in your endeavor and in your group as you organize yourself as concerned women. And I will look forward to receiving your papers, not just in a presentation form, but in a proper article that we could publish in Transformation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.